Happy Groundhog Day. I don't know if you know whether the shadow was seen or not, but officially what's his face Phil, the groundhog, Puxatawny, there we go, Puxatawny Phil did in fact see his shadow. So at least Pennsylvania can look forward to 6 more weeks of winter. You gotta look at the history of Puxatawny Phil. It's actually a stitch. 30,000 people go to see whether or not actually go to celebrate together and play together around this agenda. Great stuff. So today I'm going to be connecting with subjective mind 2 particular thoughts, ideas that came from one, the movie Groundhog Day with Bill Murray, and the other is one of my favorite movies still, a fantasy movie called Princess Bride. Many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with it. So we know from the story in Groundhog, and how many of you have seen Groundhog Day? Most, oh, fabulous, almost everybody. If you haven't seen it, you gotta see it. So Phil, who's the character in the movie that Bill Murray plays, has this recycling day over and over 2,000 times he has this day, where he wakes up to Sonny and Cher, and he spends his whole day, the same events recreate around him, and he works his way slowly through all of that stuff, and he has this goal of hooking up with the producer of his radio show program. He's a weatherman. That's his goal, and so he tries all sorts of manipulations, as you know, and they don't work. None of them work. But over all this time, Bill Murray invests himself in getting a little bit better and a little bit smarter every single day, until the subjective of him starts seeing wholeness, health, well-being, ease, and he starts living his life accordingly. Well, what a novel construct. That's what Science of Mind is all about. So the other thing I want to tie in is Princess Bride, where the bishop comes out and he starts with Wav, Twue Wav is what brings us together today. That line right there, to me, is the best opening for a talk on love that could ever be imagined, because love is what brings us together in this room. And more importantly than just love itself as the idea, the concept, the ideals that we have about it, the stories we have about it, the beliefs ad nauseum we have about what love is or should be, or et cetera, as you know, if you're over about 6, you understand there are different kinds of love. Twue love is what I'm going to talk about today. And there's a problem with Twue love. There's a problem with true love itself, and it's the definitions we hold about love. Our definitions are our law. Our definitions live inside the subjective mind. And that comes from how we were raised, what our parents showed as love. Everything we think about love is a bottom line conclusion. It's a definition of how we have seen love manifest, how we have experienced love, how we have given love or not, whether it's safe to love or it's not safe to love. On and on and on it goes. That's what our individual subjective mind holds within subjective mind, the great race mind, within which there are multiple subcategories called the American race mind, and the Texas race mind, and the Abilene, Texas race mind, and the Breckenridge, Texas race mind, and the Wichita Falls, Texas race mind, and the family mind, the individual family unit. All of those things add up to a collective race mind called the American mind. And right, wrong, good, bad, and different, it is what it is. It's driven by all of that history and all of those experiences and all those conclusions and all the things that people have told you how you ought to live and what you ought to be and who you ought to marry and a job you ought to have for the rest of your life. Blah. Been there, did that. And it took me most of my life, and I'm no young pup, it took me most of my life to start thinking about the possibility of not living according to somebody else's notion of what my life ought to be, or more accurately, by interpretation of their notion of what my life ought to be. You with me? There are multiple layers here that we get to go through because it's our joy to do that. I love turning job into joy. It's my joy to awaken to the individual subjective mind I have lived with up until now because I have changed it. All of the history still exists, but I choose to accept and choose to embrace and claim different aspects of subjective mind for me and my experience and my life. And it has showed up, it has ended up pretty cool. But I had to learn how to stop interpreting what other people want from me and stop listening so much to what they want from me or say they want from me when in fact they have no idea what they want from me except to behave according to their whims and wishes. I chose not to play. Subsequently became an outcast in a lot of communities. I don't care. I care about living. I care about life. I care about you and you being the God that you are as you, specifically you. Think about it. There are all these possible fully expressed beings in this room. And the more each person chooses to live as that fully expressed being, the God within them, the more God we have present. The more creativity, the more love, the more joy. That's heaven on earth. I had a license plate in my first pulpit. I had a license plate made after I got to Las Cruces, New Mexico. And it was the letters C-G-O-D-N-I-T, see God in it. And people kept saying, oh, that's arrogant. What are you saying? You're saying you're God? Yeah. And so are you. No, that's blasphemy. I'm serious. I heard that stuff from people. So I changed vehicles, and that particular vehicle, the license plate I got was HVNNOW, Heaven Now. Well, that didn't get me so much rancor. At least. But it was a belief that I held was possible, that I could have heaven now. I could drag heaven down here to earth and have it be my experience and share that idea, that possibility with everyone around me. And there, I became a Science of Mind minister, blah. That's our burden. I define love as acceptance. How do you define love? I define love as acceptance after over 60 years of struggling with what the heck this stuff is that's so important, so vital in so many books, etc. I define it as acceptance. Because if I accept you as you is, you stand a chance of becoming more of the true you as you is. And as that continues moment to moment to moment, evolving. That new expression, and the new expression from that, and the new expression from that, that constant evolution that we are exposed to externally all the time and can internally choose all the time. So every morning with breakfast, Jan and I have started reading one of Robert Greene's The Daily Laws, and we use it as a catalyst for conversation. If you're not familiar with the book, it's worth checking out. You know, if you have Libby, you can find a copy on your local library and you can read an example of it, but I recommend you get the book. friend of mine who mentioned it to me has been doing it every single day for 3 years. And she said, man, sometimes it really pisses me off, but he's right. And that's the way I sort of went into the idea, with that possibility on both sides. He might make me upset, and he might be speaking the truth. So many times we will each read these, and I say, I got nothing. There's no argument for truth. So one of those days came across a quote of Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher, and a bit of a curmudgeon, but certainly a critic of society in general. And come on, I know it's there. There we go. And it speaks to the subjective mind, which is a great topic within the science of mind. Trust your feelings, he has in quotations with an exclamation point. And then he proceeds. But feelings are nothing final or original. Behind feelings there stand judgments and evaluations which we inherit in the form of inclinations, aversions. The inspiration born of a feeling is the grandchild of a judgment, and often a false judgment. And in any event, not a child of your own. To trust one's means to give more obedience to one's grandfather and grandmother and their grandparents than to the gods which are in us, our reason, our experience. Do you dare trust yourself fully? Like the quote Mel read? Do you dare trust yourself? That's the challenge I posed to every single classmate of all the classes I taught, every single class. I want you to trust yourself. Now that may be challenging because you probably have gone astray a time or two. So what? That's how you learn. It was Nietzsche who also said, if it doesn't kill you, well, he didn't say it this way. If it doesn't kill you, it makes you interesting at parties. But what he said was that if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. Holmes, on the same subject of science of mind, this is a lengthy quote. It comes from Love and Law, where he was a little more Troweridian in his speaking because his sentences would be one paragraph long, kind of a thing, okay? So bear with me, stick with it. He makes it much more succinct in later versions of his writings. The subjective side of an individual's thought does not mean another mind. It means the accumulation of race belief which we accept operating through us. The thought forms which we have created and with which we have surrounded ourselves, our mental beliefs underneath, the result of our objective thinking and receiving through race suggestions, is termed subjective consciousness. This is a lot of verbiage. Hang with me. It is that power of attraction or repulsion which the individual mentally sets up within that is the subjective side of your mind. It's not another mind, it's your own mind operating. That's all. Your life and mind depend upon the subjective of your thought. Who we are, as well as what we have in health or wealth or peace of mind, will be the result of the accumulation of our thinking. Always. It could not be anything else. Now, all of that verbiage, bottom line says you can change your mind. Jan, how old were you when you said you finally heard that you could change your mind?
I was 50 years old.
50 years old. Some people never get that far. Okay? And they don't get that far because they believe what everybody else tells them, and they have just buy into that, and they lockstep through their life knowing this is the way it is and should be. Well, how'd that work for you? If you're in this room, you probably found out it was not working as well as you thought it should. I doubt anybody here, well, maybe one or two, were raised in the science of mind philosophy. Most of us were raised in something else. sometimes in situations that are much more dogmatic than others. But I know every single one of us have been told how we ought to live our life. Someone somewhere in our life who was, at least in short term or long term, we held as important, as our guide, as our God even possibly. Our first gods were our parents. They nurtured us, they supplied nourishment, etc., etc. But if we look at love as acceptance, true love as acceptance, then what have you accepted in your life? Have you accepted true love? Psychologists might call it healthy love compared to the other. And I'm sure you know that there are some people, or maybe you've been exposed to some people, possibly even yourself, that there was a period of time in your life where you thought maybe if you weren't being abused, you weren't being loved. That's tragic to me. And it bends the ideas of what love ought to be. We can change that. We don't have to believe it that way. Because if you take what you believe and work with it enough, it becomes a possibility in your mind. And you continue to work as a possibility in your mind, it becomes a probability in your life. And if you continue working that same thing long enough, it becomes actual. It becomes your experience. It shows up in the world all around you, the people you attract, etc., etc. That's the brilliance of the science of mind philosophy. That's what made me go, in a room of 80 blue hairs with this big orator, barrel-chested gentleman speaking the science of mind the very first time I walked into a church. It was that message that, to me, was the reason to pursue this a little bit further. And I have yet, and I tell you, I have looked. I haven't found anything as valuable as this teaching, if you work it. If you don't work it, if you don't work your beliefs, if you don't correct your beliefs, if you don't change your mind on an ongoing basis so that you choose better each and every single moment, then it's going to be a bunch of fluff. This philosophy is not fluff. It's hard. The other thing that we ran into in Robert Greene's book was the hard way. And so I created a new Graves law. The hard way is the way. Boy, that's encouraging, isn't it? Doesn't that make you want to get up in the morning? The hard way is the way. Sometimes it's the only way. But bottom line, the message therein that I got out of it was sometimes it's the hard way. That's the most important way. So the question I would ask, which grows me more? Not grows me more as in suffering on the cross kind of grows me more, and not worshiping the hard, but which grows me more, which makes me more of who I want to become more of. And frankly, the inside way is probably usually the hard way. And if we go to the inside direction, if we go the inside way, we start finding that which works for us individually because it's true to us, for us. So I also say, to claim is to accept is to have. If you claim it, you have accepted it, which means you have loved it. I don't remember who it was. I want to say it was Catherine Ponder, but it was a long time ago. Somebody said, if you really want to know what you value in your life, look at your checkbook. Good guidance, huh? It's a great wake-up call to what the inner guide, the value, the driver is for us. And I can't think of anything better to think about. Where am I putting my energy, my attention, my love? Because that's what I'm accepting in my life, that's what I'm claiming in my life, and that's what ultimately will become my life. Remember, you move from belief into claiming into experiencing. You move that direction. It's always to the more concrete. So I came across this poem. This has been a long time ago, and I just love it. It's offered. It was written by Regina Sarah Ryan, who was a former nun who left the convent in 1970 to pursue her own meditation and contemplations. The name of the poem is Love Dangerously, and she's got a key at the end. Stay with it. Deliver us, O God, O truth, O love, from quiet loving, from polite and politically correct language, from appropriate gesture and form, and whatever else we think must put forth to invoke or to praise you. Let us instead love dangerously, wantonly, lustfully, passionately. Let us demand with every ounce of our strength. Let us storm the gates of heaven. Let us shake up ourselves and our plaster saints from the sleep of years. Let us instead love dangerously. Let us throw ourselves from the top of the tower. Let us risk a descent to the darkest region of the abyss. Let us put our head into the lion's mouth and direct our feet to the entrance of the dragon's cave. Let us love dangerously. Let us not hold back in little portion, dealing out our lives, our precious minutes, and our energies like some efficient accountant. Let us rather love dangerously, unsafe, profligate, wasteful. Let us ask for nothing less than the infinite to ravage us. Let us ask for nothing less than annihilation in the fires of love. Let us not love in holy half measures, nor walk the middle path for too long, but love madly, foolishly. Let us be too ecstatic. Let us be too overwhelmed in sorrow and let us be too overwhelmed in sorrow and remorse. Let us be undone and dismembered and gladly. Left to our own device, what structure, if deceit, we have created. What battlements erected, what labyrinths woven, what traps set for ourselves, then fallen into. Enough. Let us love dangerously, hot loving, wet loving, fierce loving, fiery loving, improper loving, exuberant loving, drunken and completely unrealistic loving. Let us say yes, again and again and again, and yes some more. Let us love dangerously. The most dangerous love is yes. And I think the most powerful yes is the yes to ourselves, the yes to the soul of us, the yes to the God of us expressing as us, and say no in order to use as a filter to get away from the stuff that doesn't support that inner yes, to claim the yes of love, Twue love, right here, right now, and forevermore. Bless you. So with Twue love in our minds, let's move into that greater love, that infinite, that some call God, some call Spirit, and by any other name, it's still the same stuff. It's infinite power, infinite presence, and the infinite love of life that happens within every single person. Consciously or unconsciously, it already happens. So move with me into that space of knowing that infinite power and presence and intelligence. And notice that it beats the heart within. Notice that it breathes the body. It refreshes the mind. It heals every cell moment to moment to moment. That's the power of love. That's the power of acceptance. So right now, I accept that truth, that wholeness, that well-being that the wholeness brings, and the love that manifests from it, the greater acceptance that comes from the yes and the yes and the yes to life. I know this for myself, and every single time I make myself more aware of it, it becomes greater and more concrete in my mind, in my soul, in my affairs. And I know this very same fact, the truth behind it, and the experience that comes from it for every person in this room, indeed for all. Life has already become better and continues to do so with this simple revelation, with this remembering. So along with this remembrance, since it feeds me inside and outside, I feel such gratitude. The meal has been well served, well prepared, and decently, wonderfully, gloriously enjoyed. So I let this ripple through every thought. I let this ripple through every word and every act. I let it ripple in me and as me, and I know the very same as well for everyone. So since it already is, I let it be. And together we affirm it by saying, and so it is.